So it's your opinion on the Silvery Barbs in the new Strixhaven book. And I have seen all the hubbub on YouTube and Twitter and everywhere about how apparently overpowered it is. But I have not looked at it. So I don't actually know what it does. Have you?
I have. I've given it a lot of thought. Most groups, it does not matter because most players aren't running like optimal D&D, and they're just kind of there for whatever, and they probably won't even pick that spell because it doesn't do damage. And so, or at least not direct damage. Most people I play with, I'd never have to worry about them doing crazy things with this. If you're playing with a lot of optimal people, it also probably doesn't matter because they're probably doing a lot of other crazy things too. And so adding rerolls to try to make enemies fail their saves and everything won't break the game or anything. But there are some weird interactions where it is a first level spell. So now let's get into like game design, right? And so meta effect on D&D, not a big deal. Most groups, it won't matter. But for game design, I think it's pretty bad design in that as a reaction, which already reactions are hard to fill out in your action economy. And so when you add something in that's pretty premium as a reaction, shield and absorb elements are good examples. Those are a lot of automatic picks in like optimal builds, just because you can round out your action economy and do more things in rounds of combat, and they're defensive. But this one is very ubiquitous in how you can use it defensively, offensively, and that sort of thing. It adds more dice rolling to the game, which if you want more dice rolling and you're into that, great. If your players are struggling to tell you what the totals of their dice are, like we said earlier, this is going to be a challenge. And another thing about it is it's a first level spell, which means a lot of feats can give it to you. You can also challenge a counter spell or a dispel magic with it. If someone had to do a roll for it, then you can potentially counterspell a counter spell with a first level spell. It's kind of weird like that, if they had to roll for the counter spell. And then I've been a wizard of 18th level with spell mastery, where they turn a first level and a second level spell into essentially cantrips they can do over and over again, no spell slot. And so if you have a wizard that does this over and over again, every round as a reaction, that can get a little bit old, I imagine, for DMs. But so I think it's pretty poor game design. Most of my players or people I play with, it wouldn't matter. So it's not really something I would need to ban.
Yeah, I think there's some really good points there. I've put it up on the screen for those of you who haven't seen it, and I quickly skimmed over it while I was reading that. But I like how you came at it from a game design point of view and a broken point of view. I've never played with players who are like hyper min-maxers, like people who want the best damage for their character or want the thing. I've always played with players who care about the story of their character and stuff like that, and the story of the experience in D&D. So, but I imagine there are going to be people out there, there are going to be players out there who are going to try to abuse this. And as you said, it's probably going to get very old very quickly for those people if they do manage to do it. But yeah,
it's still a resource though. It still takes spell slots, so you can't just do it all day unless you're that level 18 wizard, like I mentioned. So, but here's another thing: if you're playing with a group that is Nova based, which is you do like one big combat and then rest, instead of doing like a gauntlet of like 6 small encounters and maybe a boss somewhere in there. This kind of spell gets super inflated in value because you're just trying to focus down on one combat encounter and you can just use everything, use it all. That's what, when people say Nova, that's what they mean. It's like you're going to use up everything just as fast as you can. And so those kind of games, this sort of thing is going to bug you as a DM because your players are going to use it every time. But if you are doing more encounters, which a lot of the adventure modules are, if you do those sorts of things, you often have like a lot of small skirmishes where they have to decide whether they're going to use spells like this and if they're going to save them for the boss, and maybe they don't even know who the boss is. So like, is this the boss? And so that's not as big of a deal. But if you're playing a Nova style where you set up people where they get to rest a lot after they fight, then this sort of spell is going to be a pretty automatic pick for your spellcasters.
And I think something I always keep in the back of my mind as well is that anything the players can do as a DM, you can do it as well. You can easily just make a bad guy that has a similar mechanic or a similar problem that they then have to deal with the problem. So yeah, I think that's sort of my brief overview of broken things.
Yeah. And
Quotations broken things.
and one thing I'd add to that, I completely agree with a video that was done by Cody from Taking 20, where he said, stop balancing your encounters and just let your players be awesome. Because if they take a spell like Silvery Barbs, it's because they think it'll be fun. And your goal is to have them have fun. So if Silvery Barbs is fun for them, you can thank Wizards of the Coast that they gave them a spell that your players think is fun. And so you don't have to like counter them necessarily. You can just let them enjoy what they want it to do. You know, you can give them other challenges where they have to try other things too. That's great. But in the end, questions like this about Silvery Barbs, is it fun for your group? That's the only thing you need to know.